My daughter-in-law smirked as she told the judge I was mentally unstable and dangerous to my own granddaughter. But when my attorney revealed what was actually in my will, her face turned white as a sheet. The entire courtroom fell silent as the judge looked at her and said, "You've made a terrible mistake. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has reached." The courtroom was packed that Thursday morning. I could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on my back as I walked down the center aisle, my sensible heels clicking against the polished floor. At 65, I still stood tall, my silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing the navy suit I'd purchased for my late husband's funeral 15 years ago. I caught sight of my son, Wesley, sitting beside his wife, Vanessa, in the front row. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Vanessa, however, stared directly at me, her perfectly made-up face twisted into a smug smile. She wore a cream designer dress that probably cost more than what most people in that courtroom made in a month. Her manicured hand rested possessively on Wesley's arm. My heart ached seeing my son so distant, so unreachable. The little boy who once ran to me with skinned knees and bright smiles was now a stranger, a puppet whose strings were firmly in his wife's grasp. I took my seat beside my attorney, Theodore Montgomery, a man who had been my friend and legal advisor for over 30 years. Ted patted my hand reassuringly. "Ready, Elaine?" he whispered. I nodded, though inside I felt anything but ready. This wasn't how I imagined spending my golden years, fighting for the right to see my only grandchild. Judge Amelia Sutton entered the courtroom, her stern face revealing nothing as she took her seat. She was known for her fairness, but also for her no-nonsense approach. "We're here today regarding the case of Thornton versus Thornton Kincaid," she announced, her voice clear and authoritative. "This is a petition for grandparent visitation rights." She looked directly at me, then at Vanessa and Wesley. "Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this court's primary concern is the welfare of the child, Lily Thornton. This is not about adult grievances or personal vendettas." Vanessa's attorney, a slick man named Pierce Holloway, stood up first. His reputation preceded him. He specialized in high-conflict family cases and charged fees that would make most people's eyes water. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "my clients, Wesley and Vanessa Thornton Kincaid, have made the difficult but necessary decision to limit contact between their daughter Lily and Mrs. Elaine Thornton. This decision was not made lightly, but out of genuine concern for their daughter's well-being." I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white as I listened to the lies that followed. "Mrs. Thornton has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior over the past year. She undermines my client's parental authority, makes disparaging remarks about Mrs. Thornton Kincaid in front of the child, and attempts to buy the child's affection with excessive gifts." My mind flashed back to the modest presents I'd given Lily, books mostly, a telescope for her interest in stars, a handmade quilt for her birthday. Hardly excessive for a grandmother who had the means to give much more. "Furthermore," Holloway continued, "Mrs. Thornton has shown signs of mental instability. She has made unannounced visits to my client's home, has called repeatedly when asked not to, and has even attempted to pick Lily up from school without permission." That last accusation made my blood boil. The unannounced visit had been when I brought soup when Wesley was sick with the flu. The repeated calls were 3 attempts to wish Lily happy birthday when no one answered, and I had never, not once, tried to pick Lily up from school without explicit permission. In conclusion, Your Honor, while we respect the concept of grandparent-grandchild relationships, in this case, contact with Mrs. Thornton is detrimental to Lily's emotional well-being and family stability. We ask the court to deny this petition for visitation rights. As Holloway sat down, Vanessa reached over and squeezed Wesley's hand, a triumphant gleam in her eye. Wesley just stared straight ahead, his face a mask of discomfort. Ted stood up next, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Your Honor, what we've just heard is a gross mischaracterization of my client, Elaine Thornton, Mrs. Thornton is a respected businesswoman who built Thornton Real Estate from nothing after being widowed at a young age. She raised her son as a single mother while creating jobs for hundreds of people in this community. Ted gestured toward me with respect. Far from being mentally unstable, Mrs. Thornton is known for her sharp mind and sound judgment. She serves on the boards of 3 charitable organizations and has never had so much as a parking ticket. He placed a folder on the judge's bench. In this folder, Your Honor, you'll find character references from community leaders, including Mayor Patterson, Dr. Winters from Memorial Hospital, and Principal Garfield from Westlake Elementary, where Mrs. Thornton volunteers weekly to read to children. Judge Sutton opened the folder, scanning the contents with interest. As for the accusation that Mrs. Thornton undermines parental authority or speaks ill of Mrs. Thornton Kincaid, we have sworn affidavits from multiple witnesses who have observed Mrs. Thornton's interactions with her granddaughter. All confirm that she is nothing but supportive of Lily's parents in the child's presence. Ted walked back to our table and picked up another document. What this case is really about, Your Honor, is a systematic effort by Vanessa Thornton Kincaid to isolate her husband and daughter from family connections she cannot control. Mrs. Thornton was a loving presence in Lily's life, from birth until approximately 14 months ago, when she expressed concern about the lavish 8th birthday party being planned for Lily, a party that included renting out an entire amusement park at a cost of over $50,000. I heard gasps from the gallery. Judge Sutton's eyebrows rose slightly. Since that disagreement, Mrs. Thornton has been gradually cut off from her granddaughter. First, visits were reduced. Then they required supervision. Finally, they were eliminated altogether. My client has not been allowed to see her granddaughter in over 4 months, despite multiple attempts to reconcile with her son and daughter-in-law. Ted's voice grew more passionate. Your Honor, research consistently shows that children benefit from relationships with loving grandparents. Lily Thornton is being deprived of this relationship not for her benefit, but as punishment to Mrs. Thornton for daring to express an opinion contrary to her daughter-in-law's. As Ted continued presenting evidence, I watched Wesley. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes downcast. This wasn't the son I raised, a boy with a backbone and a kind heart. Somewhere along the way, Vanessa had hollowed him out, replacing his confidence with compliance. My mind drifted back to the day Wesley brought Vanessa home to meet me. She'd been charming then, complimenting my home, asking thoughtful questions about my business, laughing at all the right moments when I shared stories about Wesley's childhood. I'd been delighted, thinking my son had found someone special. The wedding was lavish, more Vanessa's style than Wesley's. I paid for it all without complaint, happy to see my son starting a new chapter. When Lily was born, I thought my heart would burst with joy. Those early years were beautiful. I'd visit regularly, babysit whenever asked, cherish every moment with my granddaughter. The changes came gradually. First, Vanessa began forgetting to tell me about Lily's school events. Then my regular Sunday dinners with them became monthly, then quarterly. Wesley's calls grew shorter, his excuses more frequent. When Lily turned 7, I noticed the changes in her too. The little girl who once ran to me with open arms became hesitant, looking to her mother for permission before hugging me. She stopped telling me about her day, her friends, her dreams. It was as if someone had coached her on what not to say to Grandma. The final straw came at Lily's 8th birthday planning meeting. Vanessa had hired an event planner who presented a proposal that seemed more appropriate for a celebrity than a child. When I gently suggested that perhaps Lily might enjoy something more meaningful than a lavish spectacle, Vanessa's eyes had turned cold. Not everyone wants to live like a pauper playing pretend philanthropist, Elaine, she'd snapped. Just because you grew up with nothing doesn't mean Lily has to pretend she isn't privileged. The words stung, not because of the jab at my humble beginnings, but because of what they revealed about how Vanessa was raising my granddaughter. There's a difference between acknowledging privilege and flaunting it, I'd replied quietly. I just want Lily to understand the value of things beyond price tags. 2 days later, Wesley called to tell me they'd decided I shouldn't come to the birthday party after all. It would be too stressful for everyone. That was the beginning of the end. Judge Sutton's voice pulled me back to the present. I'd like to hear from the parents directly, she said. Mr. Thornton, please take the stand. Wesley looked startled, then nervous, as he made his way to the witness box. After being sworn in, he sat stiffly, his eyes darting between his wife and me. Mr. Thornton, Judge Sutton began, in your own words, why have you and your wife decided to prevent your mother from seeing your daughter? Wesley cleared his throat. Well, Your Honor, Vanessa and I felt that my mother's influence was becoming problematic. She doesn't always respect our decisions as parents. Can you give me a specific example? The judge pressed. Wesley shifted uncomfortably. She tells Lily stories about growing up without much money, about having to work for everything. Vanessa and I don't want Lily to feel guilty about the advantages we can give her. And is that the only reason? Wesley glanced at Vanessa, who gave him a sharp nod. My mother can be controlling, Your Honor. She built this big company and she's used to everyone doing what she says. But Vanessa and I are Lily's parents. We should decide what's best for her. My heart cracked hearing these words from my son's mouth, words that sounded nothing like him and everything like Vanessa. Mr. Thornton, Judge Sutton continued, before these restrictions were put in place, how would you describe your daughter's relationship with her grandmother? Wesley hesitated. They were close. Lily always enjoyed spending time with her. Did you ever observe your mother behaving inappropriately with your daughter? Anything that concerned you as a parent? No, not exactly, Wesley admitted. But Vanessa noticed things I didn't. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. You may step down. Mrs. Thornton Kincaid, please take the stand. Vanessa strode confidently to the witness box, arranging herself gracefully before fixing the judge with a practiced, concerned expression. After being sworn in, Vanessa launched into her testimony with well-rehearsed precision. Your Honor, I have nothing but respect for my mother-in-law's accomplishments, she began, her voice dripping with false sincerity. But Elaine has never accepted that Wesley chose to marry me. From the beginning, she's tried to maintain control over him, and now she's trying to exert that same control over our daughter. Can you provide specific instances of this controlling behavior? Judge Sutton asked. Certainly. She constantly undermines our parenting decisions. When we allow Lily a new phone or designer clothes, Elaine makes comments about when she was young and how children should earn things. She brings Lily these old-fashioned books with outdated values, instead of letting her enjoy normal things girls her age. Like, I had to bite my tongue. The old-fashioned books were classics like Anne of Green Gables and Little Women books about strong, independent girls. She tries to turn Lily against me. Vanessa continued. She'll say things like, your mother wouldn't understand this, or this will be our little secret. That's grooming behavior, Your Honor. The accusation was so outrageous I gasped audibly. Ted placed a restraining hand on my arm. And most concerning, Vanessa said, lowering her voice dramatically, Elaine's behavior has become increasingly erratic. She shows up unannounced, calls at all hours, and has even tried to bribe Lily's teachers to give her information about our daughter. We're genuinely concerned about her mental state. Judge Sutton studied Vanessa carefully. Mrs. Thornton Kincaid, do you have any evidence of this alleged mental instability? Medical reports, incidents witnessed by neutral third parties? Vanessa faltered slightly. It's more a pattern of behavior, Your Honor. Wesley and I believe she's having trouble accepting that she's aging and losing her relevance. She's trying to cling to Lily because she has nothing else in her life. I felt a surge of anger. Nothing else in my life? I had built a company that employed over 200 people. I volunteered weekly at schools and hospitals. I had friends, interests, and a life full of meaning beyond my family role. Mrs. Thornton Kincaid, Judge Sutton continued, before this estrangement, did you ever express concerns about Mrs. Thornton's influence to her directly? Did you attempt family counseling or any other intervention before cutting off contact completely? We tried talking to her, Vanessa claimed. She wouldn't listen, and family counseling would just give her another opportunity to manipulate the situation. We had to make a clean break for Lily's sake. After Vanessa stepped down, Ted called our first witness, Gretchen Palmer, my assistant of 15 years. Gretchen described the numerous attempts I'd made to reconcile with Wesley and Vanessa, the thoughtful gifts I'd sent to Lily that were returned unopened, the heartbreaking voicemails from Lily that suddenly stopped coming. Mrs. Thornton has been devastated by this separation, Gretchen testified, but she's always remained respectful. She's never spoken ill of Mrs. Thornton Kincaid in my presence, even when she had every reason to be angry. Next came Principal Garfield, who testified about my volunteer work and how disappointed the children at school had been when I stopped bringing photos of Lily to share during story time. Mrs. Thornton is one of our most reliable volunteers, he said. The children adore her, and she has a special gift for connecting with the shy ones, the ones who struggle. There's nothing unstable about her behavior, quite the opposite. As the testimony continued, I noticed Judge Sutton watching Vanessa with increasing skepticism. Vanessa must have noticed too, because she began whispering urgently to her attorney. Finally, it was my turn to testify. As I took the stand, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The truth was all I had, and it would have to be enough. After being sworn in, I looked directly at Judge Sutton. Mrs. Thornton, she began, what are you seeking from these proceedings? I'm seeking the chance to be a grandmother to Lily, I said simply. I don't want to interfere with Wesley and Vanessa's parenting. I don't need daily visits or holidays. I just want the opportunity to maintain a relationship with my granddaughter, a relationship that was loving and positive until recently. How would you respond to the allegations that you undermined Mrs. Thornton Kincaid's authority with Lily? I took a deep breath. Your Honor, I have never deliberately undermined Vanessa's authority. Have I shared stories about my own upbringing? Yes. I grew up poor, and those experiences shaped me. I believe there's value in Lily understanding that her privileged life isn't the only reality. And what about the accusations of mental instability? I smiled sadly. The only thing I'm guilty of is a broken heart, Your Honor. I miss my granddaughter. I miss my son. I've tried everything I know to repair this relationship, but I can't do it alone. Judge Sutton nodded thoughtfully. Mrs. Thornton, if the court were to grant visitation rights, how would you ensure that these visits don't become a source of conflict for Lily? I would follow any guidelines the court establishes, I replied. I would never speak negatively about Lily's parents in her presence. All I want is to be part of her life, to see her grow, to share what wisdom I can, to love her. As I returned to my seat, I caught Wesley's eye. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of the son I knew, compassionate, fair-minded, strong. But then Vanessa touched his arm, and the shutters came down again. After a short recess, Judge Sutton returned to the bench. The courtroom fell silent. Having heard the testimony presented today, I'm inclined to grant limited visitation rights to Mrs. Thornton, she announced. However, before I make my final ruling, I want to address some troubling aspects of this case. She turned her gaze to Vanessa and Wesley. Mr. and Mrs. Thornton Kincaid, the court has seen no credible evidence that Mrs. Thornton poses any risk to your daughter. The allegations of mental instability appear to be without foundation. In fact, the testimony suggests that Mrs. Thornton has been reasonable and restrained in the face of what appears to be a deliberate campaign to alienate her from her granddaughter. Vanessa's face flushed with anger. She whispered something to her attorney, who stood up. "Your Honor, before you make your ruling, we'd like to introduce new evidence that speaks directly to Mrs. Thornton's motivations in this case." Ted immediately objected. "Your Honor, introducing new evidence at this stage is highly irregular. We've had no opportunity to review or respond to whatever Mr. Holloway is attempting to present." Judge Sutton frowned. "Mr. Holloway, this is indeed unusual timing. What is this evidence, and why wasn't it presented earlier?" "It has only recently come to our attention, Your Honor," Holloway claimed smoothly. "We have documentation suggesting that Mrs. Thornton has made significant changes to her will that would disinherit her son and granddaughter if certain conditions aren't met. We believe this petition is nothing more than financial manipulation, an attempt to force my clients to comply with Mrs. Thornton's wishes or face financial consequences." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I sat in shock, unable to believe what I was hearing. Judge Sutton banged her gavel. "Order! I'll review this alleged evidence, but I must say, Mr. Holloway, I'm troubled by this last-minute tactic." Ted leaned over to me, whispering urgently, "Elaine, what is he talking about? Have you changed your will recently?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, but not in the way they're suggesting. Ted, we need to—" Before I could finish, Holloway approached the bench with a document. "Your Honor, this is a copy of a draft amendment to Mrs. Thornton's will, provided by a concerned employee at her attorney's office. As you can see, it stipulates that her son will only inherit her considerable estate if he ensures regular contact between Mrs. Thornton and her granddaughter." Judge Sutton accepted the document with a frown. After reviewing it briefly, she looked up. "Mr. Montgomery, were you aware of this amendment?" Ted stood. "Your Honor, I am Mrs. Thornton's attorney of record, including for estate matters. May I approach to review this document?" After examining the paper, Ted's expression changed from concern to indignation. "Your Honor, this document is incomplete and taken entirely out of context. Furthermore, I have serious concerns about how opposing counsel obtained what appears to be a privileged draft document from my office. I would like to present Mrs. Thornton's actual, executed will amendment, which tells a very different story." Ted returned to our table and removed a sealed envelope from his briefcase. After receiving permission from me with a nod, he handed it to the judge. "This is the executed amendment to Mrs. Thornton's will, signed and notarized 3 months ago," Ted explained. "Far from being a tool of manipulation, it reflects Mrs. Thornton's genuine concern for her granddaughter's future and values." Judge Sutton read the document carefully, her expression changing from skepticism to surprise. "Mr. Holloway," she said finally, "the document you presented is indeed misleading when compared to the executed amendment. Mrs. Thornton has not disinherited her son or granddaughter. In fact, she has established a substantial trust for her granddaughter's education and future needs, regardless of whether she is permitted to maintain a relationship with her." Vanessa's smug expression faltered. "Furthermore," Judge Sutton continued, "while Mrs. Thornton has indeed made changes to how her business interests will be handled after her death, these changes appear to be prudent estate planning rather than manipulation. The bulk of her estate will still benefit her son and granddaughter, though with thoughtful restrictions to ensure the family business continues to support its employees and the community." She looked directly at Vanessa. "Mrs. Thornton Kincaid, are you aware that your mother-in-law has specifically provided for your daughter's education through graduate school if she chooses to attend, regardless of any personal conflicts between the adults in her life?" Vanessa's face had gone pale. She shook her head slightly. "And are you aware," Judge Sutton continued, "that Mrs. Thornton has established a charitable foundation that will be partially directed by Lily when she reaches adulthood, giving her the opportunity to develop her own philanthropic interests?" Again, Vanessa shook her head. Judge Sutton turned to me. "Mrs. Thornton, Would you explain to the court your thinking behind these estate provisions? I stood, my voice steady despite the emotion I felt. Your Honor, everything I've built in my life came from hard work, determination, and the support of this community. When my husband died and left me with a 4-year-old son and a mountain of debt, it was a small business loan from the local bank that gave me a chance to start over. I glanced at Wesley, willing him to remember. I built Thornton Real Estate not just for wealth, but to create something meaningful: jobs for people who needed them, homes for families, development that respected our town's character. I've always taught Wesley that wealth comes with responsibility. It's not just about what you can buy, but what you can build and who you can help. I took a deep breath. The provisions in my will are designed to ensure that Lily understands this legacy. Yes, she will inherit substantial assets, but also the responsibility that comes with them. The educational trust is unconditional, because I believe education is a right, not a privilege to be earned or a tool for control. The charitable foundation will give her the chance to discover the joy of helping others, something I fear she's not currently being taught. I looked directly at Vanessa. I never intended these provisions as manipulation or punishment. They reflect my values and my hopes for my granddaughter's future. I would have explained all this to Wesley and Vanessa if they had been willing to have a conversation with me. The courtroom was silent as I returned to my seat. I could feel the weight of every gaze, but the only one that mattered was Wesley's. For the first time in months, he was looking at me, really looking, with an expression of dawning recognition, as if seeing me clearly after a long fog. Judge Sutton cleared her throat. In light of this clarification, Mr. Holloway, do you wish to withdraw your objection to visitation rights? Holloway conferred briefly with Vanessa, who appeared to be arguing with him in harsh whispers. Finally, he stood. Your Honor, we maintain our position that visitation is not in the child's best interest, he stated, though with noticeably less conviction. Judge Sutton nodded. Very well. Having considered all testimony and evidence presented, I am granting Mrs. Thornton's petition for grandparent visitation rights. Mrs. Thornton will be permitted to spend time with her granddaughter for 1 weekend per month and 1 week during summer vacation. These visits will initially be supervised by a court-appointed mediator, not to monitor Mrs. Thornton's behavior, but to ensure a smooth transition and open communication between all parties. She fixed Vanessa with a stern look. Mrs. Thornton Kincaid, let me be very clear. Any attempt to interfere with these visitation rights or to alienate Lily from her grandmother will be viewed by this court as contempt and dealt with accordingly. You've made a terrible mistake in your assessment of your mother-in-law's intentions, and I strongly encourage you to reconsider your approach to this relationship for the sake of your daughter. As the judge continued outlining the specific terms of the visitation schedule, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was a start, a chance to rebuild my relationship with Lily and perhaps, in time, with Wesley too. When court was adjourned, I gathered my belongings slowly, not wanting to rush the moment. Ted squeezed my hand. Congratulations, Elaine. It's a good outcome. I nodded, blinking back tears. Thank you, Ted, for everything. As we prepared to leave, I was surprised to see Wesley approaching, alone. Vanessa had stormed out immediately after the ruling, her heels clicking angrily across the marble floor. Wesley stood awkwardly before me, his hands in his pockets, looking more like the uncertain teenager he'd once been than the successful architect he'd become. Mom, he began, his voice rough with emotion. I didn't know about the will, about the educational trust for Lily or the foundation. Vanessa told me you were planning to cut us off completely unless we did exactly what you wanted. I shook my head sadly. I would never do that, Wesley. You're my son. Lily is my granddaughter. Nothing could make me stop loving either of you. I know that now, he admitted, shame evident in his face. I should have known it all along. I should have talked to you directly instead of letting Vanessa. Instead of. He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. We both knew what had happened, how he had allowed himself to be isolated, manipulated, turned against his own mother. It's not too late, Wesley, I said gently. We can start again. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I'd like that, Mom. And I want Lily to know you, the real you, not the version Vanessa has been describing. Lily misses you. She asks about you all the time, even though she's been told not to. My heart swelled hearing that my granddaughter hadn't forgotten me. This won't be easy, Wesley continued, glancing toward the door where Vanessa had exited. She won't accept this ruling gracefully. I know, I acknowledged. But I'm not going anywhere, Wesley. Whatever happens, I'll be here for you and for Lily. He hesitated, then stepped forward and embraced me. It was the first hug we'd shared in over a year, and I savored every second of it, memorizing the feel of my son's arms around me once again. As we parted, Wesley looked more determined than I'd seen him in years. I need to go now, he said. Vanessa and I have a lot to discuss, but I'll call you tomorrow about arranging your first visit with Lily. I watched him walk away, straight-backed and purposeful. Whatever conversation awaited him at home wouldn't be pleasant, but for the first time in a long time, I had hoped that my son was finding his voice again. 2 weeks later, I stood nervously on the porch of a small coffee shop where the court mediator had arranged for my first visit with Lily. I'd arrived early, my car filled with books I thought she might enjoy, though I'd brought only one inside. I didn't want to overwhelm her or appear to be buying her affection as Vanessa had accused. The bell above the door jingled, and there she was, my beautiful granddaughter, taller than I remembered, her dark hair in a neat braid. Wesley stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. There was no sign of Vanessa. For a moment, Lily hesitated, looking up at her father uncertainly. Then her eyes met mine, and her face broke into a radiant smile. "Grandma!" she cried, running toward me. I knelt down and opened my arms, catching her in a fierce hug that made up for all the months we'd lost. Over her shoulder, I saw Wesley watching us, a bittersweet smile on his face. "I missed you so much," Lily whispered in my ear. "I missed you too, sweetheart," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "More than you could ever know." As we settled at a table, Lily chattering excitedly about school and friends and the book she was reading, I caught Wesley's eye. He nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of what we both knew, that families are complicated, relationships require work, and love sometimes means fighting for what matters most. I didn't know what the future held. Vanessa might never accept me, and the road ahead would surely have its challenges. But sitting there with my granddaughter's hand in mine, listening to her stories, watching her eyes light up with the same curiosity and intelligence I'd always seen in Wesley, I knew one thing for certain. Some battles are worth fighting, no matter the cost. And this one, the battle for family, for connection, for the right to love and be loved, was the most important battle of my life. The story we tell is fictional, but it is based on some real events. The names and places have been changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to think. How many grandparents are suffering in silence, cut off from the grandchildren they love? I'm genuinely curious. If it were you in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to be silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face it all to reconnect with your family? I want to know what you think, because every story is a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I assure you, they will surprise you. Thank you for staying until the end.